change anything. These states are brilliant. Why would I go down? I identify myself with that meaning. I'm on that level, once more, play the game. And so, at that moment, I began to awake. And on my bed, and I have no knowledge of the meaning. To me, it's 6:30 in the morning. I can't even see that I have dream. I went to my library and started to make a recording of your last lecture. And something you said triggered the dream. And it all came back in detail as I just told you. And I said, did I dream an accident? Or did I dream it long, long, long ago? I don't know. But however, it thrilled me, and so I thought I'd share it with you. And at the very end, to make it like that, he started to my note, and he said, I congratulated me on my rapid physical recovery. And he asked me if I'd done something, and this is so tell him all about it. So I said I did it all in my imagination. And I imagine I was in your office, and you were saying exactly what you said. And then I began to explain to him how imagination works. And imagination creates reality. He said to me in an elderly philosophical man, you know, my life thinks things like that. I'm very flattering. But he said, this is a strange experience. We're out driving recently on Sunday afternoon, and the radio was turned in to a ball game. And this man is coming to bed. And I dislike him. And I say to my wife, he shouldn't be in the big league. He can't hit. He can't catch. And he can't run. What right is he playing in the big league? And she said to me, you shouldn't think things like that. You should think nice things about him. And see him doing wonderful things. He said, all right, I will. I see him hit a home run. He steps to the plate, and the first ball pitched, he bells it into the bleachers. And then said he to his wife, I'll never do that again. It's too fast. I must tell you, the lecture that triggered the memory of his dream. For here we all are seated in this room, and we think we are saying completely this. And what his dream signifies, we will not take the harm. And yet you're the animating power of the universe. And all that world is moving around you because you are identified with the present state. Well, the thing he began to record was this. I found myself in dream, but not knowing it was a dream. I found myself on a crowded subway train in New York City.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I cut that off because the second dream is equally as long as the first. So I didn't want to play like 25 minutes at the top. If you want to hear that whole, I'll play the rest of the lecture later. If you want to hear, let me just turn down my mic a little bit. If you want to hear that entire lecture, you can find it on YouTube as Neville Goddard. It is within. And the guy who he's talking about had the dream. Before I get into this little rant, let me give a shout out for Campbell Complicated, who does the music for this stream. And he does he plays live music with his trio every Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. As far as I know, only trio on Twitch, and certainly the best. Even if they weren't the only one, they'd be the best one. If you want to check out the kind of music they play, you can click on that link, play it in the background while you're listening to this, because I currently don't play any music on the stream, so that'd be a pretty good little compliment. Okay, so in that lecture, Neville made plain that this dream that this student wrote to him is the perfect explanation and metaphor for what's actually going on here on this level as well. Now, I'm pretty sure, though I don't think in the lectures he gave any total confirmation, but that particular student is also a student who was a writer for TV in LA. And also, by the way, if anybody's watching who's chatting, if at any point my camera freezes, please let me know. I may still not know because I don't always look at the screen where I have all the chat, but I'm more likely to see that than look over at my camera, which is like frame left, and see that it's frozen, because that had been an issue last week. But anyway, so that the guy who wrote him that dream was also most likely a guy who was a writer in LA who wrote him many times about successes he had getting scripts not only accepted but liked by the producer he was working for. It is also possible that is Rod Serling, though by the time he would have been truly prominent and had his own show, Twilight Zone, he probably wasn't writing Neville as much anymore, and eventually Neville had a little bit of a falling out with him and upbraided him in a lecture because of an episode that they did that, according to Neville, had actually ended up manifesting, involving like a hostage situation. And so Neville said that he basically wasted his gift. Now, I don't know if it's actually all the same guy, but based on the way he talks about him, it probably is. If not, the experience we just heard, that dream, may have been one of the writers on Twilight Zone. But he didn't confirm whether or not it's the writer who is working in TV in LA. But anyway, I just wanted to include that as a little factoid. And I'm glad that dream got included, because if you accept that as sort of the basis when you're approaching the concept of revision, the concept that infinite possibilities exist now, and you can select from a sea of infinity what you would choose to animate, well, you can also do that with the past. So, I mean, let's just talk practically. Where does the past exist right now? Where does your past exist right now? If you answered, I mean, you could say, well, it exists in a photograph, or it exists in video I have, so I have documentation of the past. Okay, well, that's true. Where else does it exist? I mean, if you answer anything other than your own mind or in the minds of other people, you've probably got a wrong answer. However, Neville's claim is that, so yes, it exists in your mind, and it also exists in the fact that it's continuing to influence and animate situations in your present reality and in your future reality. And if you don't alter certain unfavorable past experiences, and you've accepted a body of beliefs because of that experience, you will continue to experience similar situations. So, therefore, revise, prune these prior experiences, change them so that they're no longer creating in your world. And there were some other concepts we've been addressing over the past 2 weeks to build up to revision. Firstly, Neville's way of addressing sin, which is sin is knowing what to do and not doing it. Sin is essentially refusing to move an imagination into your preferred state, whether that's for you or for another person. And sin is simply not getting what you want, missing the mark. So you have a goal and you don't achieve it, and you refuse to move into imagination into it. That is sin. Forgiveness is finally moving an imagination into the preferred state. And forgiveness, as applied to other people, is seeing them in a better state, or seeing them as close as possible to their divine image. So we've had those, and Neville also said that, forgiveness, true forgiveness, is forgetfulness, totally forgetting the state the person was in. We also did infinite states, which explains that state is a body of consciousness. It's a collection of beliefs and an experience of self that therefore creates how and what you're animating in the exterior world, including the states that you're holding others in, the states that you're consenting that they abide in. So, given that we had those concepts as an introduction and as a foundation, we can now move into revision, because in revision you are forgiving the sins of the past, both of yourself and for other people. And in doing so, you're altering who you are now and who you will be in the future. Because so often our beliefs, our assumptions, what we believe about the world, and what we choose to allow ourselves to experience is narrowed by the frame of our assumed past. However, Neville is saying that the past is not fixed. It is not set in stone. It is not a mountain that you've carved into somewhere. It, just like your present reality and your future reality, is totally clay. It can be completely molded to your preference if you're only willing to focus enough on your preferred experience that your body of beliefs changes. Now, the way we're just going to read the lecture, so I don't want to impose too much of my assumptions about revision onto it. But I will say that essentially, when it comes to revising, you do it the same way you do anything else. The way you do any other imaginal activity, especially those that you've had definite proven success with, is the way you would revise. So if you have noticed that having imaginal conversations, which if you want to know about that, what we did the lecture, Order Your Conversations Are Right, very early on. You can look it up in the video on demand, and I think it's on YouTube already, I'm not sure. Or just read the lecture. In that lecture, Neville talks about how you're having imaginal conversations with people all the time in your head. Well, if you have found that that's a very effective way for you to manifest things that you prefer, you can do that with revision. So especially if there is someone else who was either aware of or directly involved in the memory that you want to change, you can have a conversation with them, and it can be from the past or from an imaginary future, whichever you prefer, in which they relay that event to you differently. They remember it differently, indicating that something different did actually occur. I would also say that the best thing to do when you're approaching a revision is to, as Neville encourages with all imaginal activity, abandon the exterior reality as much as possible, however you prefer to do that. For some people, that's going to be as you're falling asleep and all the lights are off and there's no sort of external stimulation, maybe besides some sort of, if there's like music or something you like to listen to as you fall asleep. Or if you're someone who gets into that zoned out state a little bit better when you're walking, or when you're playing, when you yourself are playing music, or when you're cooking, or there's one of those activities like that that allows you to zone out and sort of drop whatever's going on in your world right now. That is the preferred state from which to revise, however you like to do it. Now, the one thing I would caution is that I know from talking to my friends who do consciously manifest and who are aware of revision, some of the things they've done and have encountered. So some of them have had success just picking an affirmation and repeating it, just making it part of their thoughts now. Other people have, one person in particular, I know she's watching, but she specifically intended, she moved into a state in imagination, like she imagined that she was in a certain state, and intended to have memories come up that would indicate that she had been in that state for a long time. And what happened was it automatically created memories for her that, as far as she knew, didn't happen, like didn't exist before, but they actually felt more vivid than similar memories that did actually happen. So I think what it had specifically happened was there was a day at school that she really wanted to be there for some event they were doing, and she couldn't be there because she was sick, but in the revised memory she was there and she had a great day because she wasn't sick. She was never sick. So that sort of thing can happen too, where unintentionally you will start to have memories that aren't there. And you can also wholly fabricate memories. You can insert memories that have nothing to do with a specific scene you want to revise. You just want to, boom, put that in there as something that actually happened to you. Neville also encourages, and I'm pretty sure he talks about it in this lecture, and we talked about it in the chapter we just read in the prior stream, which was also, it was a chapter from Awakened Imagination, also titled The Pruning, Shears, Revision. Neville talked about encourage you to revise every day. And so at the end of every day, you would review your day. And as you come across anything you don't want, you would alter it then and do a scene and loop it, and then continue on with the rest of the day. And anytime you find anything you want differently, you would change it. Now, I will be honest, even on days where, quote unquote, not much happens in my life, there still seems to be too much to do that. So I was doing it for a period of time, but it got to be too much. So now it's sort of like, if I can revise it in the moment, I will. If I can't, or if I just don't want to, I will sort of make a mental note that, oh, this is something I need to revise, and trust that it will come up in consciousness later at a point in time that I am willing and able to effectively revise it. And so far that has been successful for me. Well, at least in remembering to do it. Though some of these things are things that I've revised them, but they haven't manifested yet. And some of these things are like, it came up a couple more times, but again, I put it off. So, but you just kind of find a way that works for you, that you like. And I think a lot of people hearing this, you might feel like, well, geez, there's a lot I'd like to revise about my life, and feeling like it's a big, burdensome, monolithic task. And I absolutely experienced that in the beginning. And I had even done the thing of making a list of all the things I wanted to revise and all of that, and had started going through them, but it was exhausting. Like, I got a couple in, and I was like, this, it would drain me for the whole rest of the day. And if you're having that experience with revision, you might only want to pick a couple things and do them every now and then. What I found better in that regard was just generally getting to a super relaxed state and not having anything specific in mind that I wanted to imagine for, and asking for something to be presented to my consciousness that I was capable of imagining for in the future, or revising in the past at that moment. And so things have come up that way, and I revised them then. But I didn't I got away from making it like a to-do list, because it put me in a state. It was dragging me into lower states more than it was lifting me up into higher states, just in the first week or two of trying to do it. So if you're finding that is the case, you may want to pick a different tactic to approach revision. But like I said, the thing I would really recommend is just generally really relaxing, get in a meditative state, whether that's the I am meditation or you just like to listen to music, as much as possible letting go of your exterior reality and asking your deeper self within you, who is actually God, to present to you the thing you should revise, the thing that you can revise at that point in time, and guiding you through how to do it. And I would also say that a friend of mine, I don't know if she's able to tune in today, but when she tried a bunch of revisions, it ended up effectively re-traumatizing her. So you have to be excessively aware of the state that you're in when you're approaching it, and the state that you're in after the revision is complete, if this is actually allowing you to let go of an unwanted state, or if it's reanimating an unwanted state. And depending on how you are revising, this is your experience. I mean, it really just may not have been that she just may have not have been approaching revision in the correct manner, because if something is still really emotionally live for you, you're going to encounter difficulty revising it, just period. If you can't be objective towards it, you probably shouldn't be revising it in the first place, because it's going to just pull up too many unwanted states within you. If you could just forget it, if you can somehow actually forget it without suppressing it, and move into a state where that's no longer a memory popping up in your mind at all, that would probably be preferential. Or to simply assume that whatever assumptions and things you started animating based on some traumatic past experience, that's done now. That's no longer going to animate in your world. If you can just decide that now, in many cases that might be preferential to really revising the scene. In some cases, you may not really know what about the situation you want to revise, but you do know that the situation is still creating or still active in your world. So it may be better just to imagine for how it presents in the future, as opposed to doing any specific scene revised. This is all sort of a, you need to learn yourself and learn your mind and learn how this works best for you. But I would say if you've never revised before, if you're listening to this, you may completely doubt what Neville is saying, may think this is total bullshit. Still, I want you to do it. Pick one thing you want to change, do it, do a scene for it, and really don't expect that it will work. And you know what's interesting about that is a lot of times those are the ones that end up manifesting immediately, because there's a desire within you. There's a desire in your conscious mind, but then there's an urging and an insistence from God within you to show you that this is possible. So I know Neville talks a lot about belief. A lot of people who teach Neville talk about belief and talk about the law of assumption from the basis of you have to believe it in order for it to manifest. In the early stages, and this may be something that really does continue to persist, but on certain things, I noticed that there was an insistence from the deeper me to show me things. Even when I, in my conscious mind, was doubting, the deeper one within me wanted to push it out just to show me what was possible. And you can certainly have this experience with your first revision. And when it is successful, keep freaking doing it, because now you know it works. So you have no more reason to consciously doubt. I mean, it is such an incredible claim. Like, I can't think of anyone who, because a lot of people talk about reframing your past, and sort of viewing who you were in the situation differently, or, you know, the light version of forgiving other people who were involved. And this is so much more radical. This is literally telling you that you have a time machine in your head. You don't have to build one and go back in time to alter it. You actually can do it all in mind, because it's all mind right now anyway. I don't think there's anybody else who has really that radically presented this topic. And Neville himself was aware of that. Now, if there's somebody else who has done that before Neville, please let me know. Or even since, who clearly didn't know who Neville was, I would like to know about that. But just as far as I'm aware, I never saw this topic presented this way in anything other than fiction. I never heard someone telling you, like, as advice, you can change the past. People say forgive and forget, but they don't say it the way that Neville means it. He literally means actually change what happened. Forget what you think happened and change it to something you prefer. Actually change it and actually see it change your exterior world, like we're constantly living in the butterfly effect, which is just wild, you know. All right, so let's get into it. It's called the Pruning, Shears, and Revision, today's lecture. And then also tomorrow... Nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Tomorrow will be a special lecture for Neville's birthday. And we're probably going to do Neville's Purpose Revealed. That's where he talks about why he was quote-unquote sent. And by the way, I picked this background because sometimes the past seems like this room. Like, you look back on all the stuff you want to revise and tidy up, and it's like this room. At least that's been my experience. All right, pull it up. The Pruning, Shears, of Revision from 1954. This morning's subject is the Pruning, Shears, of Revision. I firmly believe that if you will wisely and daily use the Pruning, Shears, of Revision, that you will find there is no objective, beyond your ability to realize. And I mean that seriously. No objective beyond your ability to realize. When I was a boy of 7, a lady said to me, I have had a vision concerning you. I'll make it now very, very clear to you. I do not know what it is you are going to do, but I've been shown you will do something that through the centuries, after you are gone, man will not undo it. I can see it, and through the centuries, you will grow in stature long after you have gone. And then 3 men will be mentioned in hundreds of years to come, and you will be one of the 3 when something is discussed that was done for man. I feel that this morning's subject, that this could be it. That if I never said another word and you heard it and believed it and really used it, this would be the planting that would spread from us here that tomorrow could not undo. So he's like, nobody's going to revise revision away, for it is magic. This pruning shears of revision. It really is not only the achievement of objectives, but if you do it daily, it will awaken in you the Spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin. In this teaching, the sinner should always go free. You will never condemn him, for when the Spirit is awake in you, you will realize in him there is no condemnation, only forgiveness. And forgiveness is not as man of this world thinks when he omits the actual execution of his revenge. What we mean by forgiveness, the identification of the other that we would forgive with the ideal that the other wants to embody in the world. And so we do to him what we expect or would like the world to do to us. So whatever I myself would like to embody, that is the vision that I must hold of every man that I meet in my world, that no man is to be discarded, every man is to be redeemed, and my life is the process whereby that redemption is brought about. And I do it by simply identifying the other with the ideal I want to externalize in my world. So here Neville is also pointing out to us too that forgiveness is not just about someone who has done you wrong, like specifically wronged you in some way. Forgiveness is also about taking someone you're totally amicable with or you really don't have a deep relationship with, and if you see them in a state they don't want to be in, changing it in mind. So if you have a friend and y'all are best friends, you don't fight, you love each other, blah, 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 you talk all the time, but they don't have a job, they want a job right now, you would see them having a job. That's also forgiving sin. It's not just, you have some sort of disagreement with someone or you have something going wrong that you want to change. It's also just extending the spirit of Christ to other people. Now we will go back to the 2nd of Genesis. It is said, and God placed man in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Now when you read the story, you think it happened thousands of years ago. I have come to tell you it is now. So Neville, here, for anyone who doesn't know, the Bible is not about historicity or even metaphor. It is about your consciousness, what you experience in consciousness. All the characters in the Bible are you, individual, your states of consciousness that you have or will experience at some point. You are now in the Garden of Eden, and you think you are shut out or banished. You are in it, and the garden is in your mind. But you need, like every gardener, you need pruning shears, for you have slept. As you are told in that 2nd chapter, having slept, weeds have appeared in the garden, and the weeds are revealing themselves by the conditions and circumstances of life. For your garden is always projecting itself on the screen of space, and you can see by looking carefully at your world what you allow to grow in the garden of God. But you have a mission, you have a purpose. It is not to amass a fortune. You can do it if you want to. It is not to be famous. It is not to be some mighty power, but simply to tend the garden of God. That's your purpose. You are placed in the garden to dress it and to keep it, that only the lovely things grow in the garden of God. Now every man in this world is rooted in you, who look out and see that world. Every man is rooted in me. He ends in me as I am rooted in and end in God. Because he is rooted in me, he cannot bear other than the nature the root allows. So he is in me, and any changes desired in the outer world can be brought about only if I change the source of the thing I see growing in my world. Especially for people who are interested in revising towards any other person in your life, I think this is the primary key. If you understand this concept, then you understand really what is meant by everyone as you pushed out, though there is a deeper aspect to that contained within the fulfillment of the promise. So I'll read it again. Now every man in the world is rooted in you who look out and see that world. Every man is rooted in me, he ends in me, as I am rooted in and end in God. Because he is rooted in me, he cannot bear other than the nature the root allows. So he is in me, and any changes desired in the outer world can be brought about only if I change the source of the thing I see growing in my world. So let's take an example of someone who feels they're being like verbally abused by a boss or a coworker. Okay, they obviously don't want that to continue. They're even thinking about leaving that job. You can imagine for them being nice to you, but you have to actually step out of the state of being someone who can be victimized and into the state of someone who is always respected. You could simply do that and not even revise anything they've told you, and they would automatically change, at least towards you. Now, if they're doing this to other people and you really want to see them totally differently, you should imagine for them being in a totally different state as well. But my point there is they're only going to change according to how you've changed your perspective of yourself. So if you're imagining them being nice to you, but you still really feel like a victimized person, you still really feel like people are going to always come after you and bully you and not respect you, they're not going to conform. They can only change. They're your fruit. So the fruit can only change according to your roots. You have to switch your roots before that change can occur within them. And I hope that that is a practical explanation of what Neville is indicating there. So, for example, if you've had a falling out with a business partner who is screwing you over, maybe that occurred because you have a concept of success, that once you achieve a certain amount of success, people are going to come for you, and try to leech off you and hate on you and attack you. If your vision of yourself as a successful person includes haters, don't be surprised when one of the so-called haters is among what you think are your trusted business partners. This is a thing which happens all the time. In like every movie about criminal organizations, the theme of betrayal is there because the people who are successful assume that that is part of success. So if that's part of your view of success, you're animating other people to betray you, just simply because you think when you're successful, people are going to come for you and screw you over. You're creating that. It's inevitable. There's nothing wrong with them. It's you. You're the root in that situation. You see yonder fields. Don't be surprised when you see sesamum. The sesamum was sesamum, the corn was corn. The silence and the darkness knew, so is a man's fate born. So don't judge it because you are the source of the thing you are beholding. Now turn within and prune it by using these pruning shears of revision. Now this is how we do it. At the end of my day, I review the day. I don't judge it, I simply review it. This objective spirit, as in regards to your experience, is essential. If you're still emotionally charged up about something, Neville may talk about it in this lecture, maybe in another one, but he says be angry but sin not. So in other words, allow yourself to have the emotional experience, and once you've had that venting, then come to revising it. So if you're still worked up about it, and that's going to bleed into any imaginal activity you do, you need to let go of that first before you revise. At the end of my day, I review the day. I don't judge it, I simply review it. I look over the entire day, all the episodes, all the events, all the conversations, all the meetings, and then as I see it clearly in my mind's eye, I rewrite it. I rewrite it and make it conform to the ideal day I wish I had experienced. I take scene after scene and rewrite it, revise it, and having revised my day, then in my imagination I relive that day, the revised day, and I do it over and over in my imagination until this seeming imagined state begins to take on to me the tones of reality. It seems that it's real, that I actually did experience it, and I have found from experience that these revised days, if really lived, will change my tomorrows. When I meet people tomorrow that today disappointed me, they will not tomorrow, for in me I have changed the very nature of that being, and having changed him, he bears witness tomorrow of the change that took place within me. It is my duty to take this garden and really make it a garden by daily using the pruning shears of revision. I know from experience it will not only bring about these objectives and bring about these changes, but the glorious thing is it awakens in you who use it the Spirit of Jesus, and you will find yourself then not justifying but forgiving, and you will realize that freedom and forgiveness are indissolubly linked. You cannot be free and not forgive, for the one that you would bind and judge and condemn anchors you by your judgment of him, for he is in you. And so by identifying him with the ideal you want to really realize, you free yourself. You're told, forgive and you shall be forgiven. Forgive not and then you shall not be forgiven. It's automatic. It can't be otherwise, for the whole springs from you who behold it. And as you begin to practice in the very Spirit, as you begin to practice it, the very Spirit arouses itself within you, and you know that you are he that others spoke about and thought lived 2,000 years ago. So when you realize it through actual knowledge. You know it, no argument. You don't tell others. You know that you are he. He's talking about the revelation of Christ in you. And then you will read the words in the 9th of Hebrews. He appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And you will know you are the one that put away sin by the sacrifice of self. And by the sacrifice of self, it's not being a brave one who throws himself in the line of fire to protect a brother. It doesn't mean one who gives his body to be burned, one who is nailed on a cross, but the self of man is the sum total of all that the man believes and consents to is true. So that's the self that is sacrificed. And there's another Neville lecture about this exact topic called The Art of Dying, where Blake talks about I die daily. And the idea there is the same that I described last time, where there are two primary metaphors that is going on when Neville talks about Christ. There's the resurrection into the true body of God through the promise. However, every time you manifest something, you are dying to your old self, crucifying yourself to what you would prefer, just dropping that, letting that go within you, like you're crucifying your preference in consciousness, and then a period of time between that imaginal act and the eventual manifestation, and the eventual manifestation is the resurrection. So when Neville is talking about what you are sacrificing, he means that you're letting go of, you're releasing the old state of consciousness that animated this thing. So if we want to go back to this success metaphor, to the person who was successful and had a business associate betray them, they had a concept of self that they would have people coming after them, that they would have haters. They have to sacrifice that. They don't have to sacrifice their success, but they have to sacrifice the version of themselves that if they are successful, people will come after them. They have to then assume a different state for success. That, let's be just very simple and straightforward about it, that everyone is happy for their success, and only people who are going to further encourage or be uplifted by their success will come into their experience willing to work with them in their business. It's that simple and easy. To simply assume that you're not going to be met by con men. Only people who are in a state of wanting to help you, genuinely help you, or be genuinely helped by you without any ulterior or subversive motives will be presented to you in your reality. But you have to give up on the version of you that success means I have haters. I only, like people will use these things as symbols of success and then be upset when those symbols start externalizing in the form of a so-called friend. Well, you have to give up those old symbols. You have to sacrifice them and therefore release these people from these unwanted states that you put them in. I hope that's clear. I think this is something that gets a little bit lost when people are trying to distill revision in a way that doesn't acknowledge our movement from state to state. I heard of this lady, and she would make some man a wonderful wife, yet she is unwed. She desires to be the companion of a great noble person, but she is unwed. I heard that. That becomes a part of myself. That's my knowledge. I must sacrifice that self, that aspect of my being be as happy as I am, and those in my world are. For that's the self I must sacrifice and put away sin. For sin to the mystic means missing the mark. It doesn't mean the violation of certain codes, unless of course you have a mark and the violation fell short. But to sin to the mystic is simply having an aim in life and failing to realize it. So when you miss the mark, you have sinned. So he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And knowing that himself is only all he consents to, all that he accepts, all that he believes to be true, then what am I believing concerning that one? He is unemployed and can't find a job. I'm believing it. Now put away that sin where he is missing his mark, and then by putting away of the sin, I do it only by the sacrifice of myself, and myself is that belief. So now I revise. I can't say, well, I will no longer believe. I can't say, well, I will no longer believe he's unemployed. I believe he's employed. I do it by the pruning shears of revision. I bring him before my mind's eye, and I congratulate him on his good fortune, because he is now gainfully employed. I allow him to accept my congratulations, because I do not see a man unemployed. I see him employed, and he knows he is in my mind's eye. He is in my mind's eye, for in that state I have pruned him from the unemployed state, and once more reshaped the branch that grows in the garden of God. Tomorrow people will see him as they could not have seen him before. That pruning took place within me, and he will be gainfully employed. That one is unwell, you prune that branch. You don't accept one thing in the world as final unless it conforms to the ideal you want to realize in the world. But you do it daily. If you do not prune it daily, you will get out of the habit, then weeds will grow. Hello, guilty. Every man who really is a gardener, who calls himself a gardener in the garden of God, for every day is the opportunity to really prune the tree, this wonderful tree. And so everyone that you meet is a branch, rooted in the vine that you are, and you are that special tree in the garden of God, a tree bearing life, a tree bearing fruit for the food of the nations. You are that one. If you don't take me seriously today, tonight, do not let the sun descend upon any vexation of the day. Just look at it, don't deny it, don't duck it. Look at it that you may prune it and then reshape it. Take the conversations with your friends today. Were they pleasant? Were they arguments? No matter what it is, were they negative? Then rewrite the script and just imagine the conversation to have taken place that you now are rewriting for the first time. And it will take place, for everything in your world that you behold, though it appears without, it is within, in your own imagination. And this wonderful imagination of yours is Christ Jesus. Imagination is the actual habitation of every created thing. No matter what you see in the world, it springs from your imagination. So that's where you go. That's the workshop, the garden of God. And now you have a mission. You have a purpose in life. That's a noble purpose because you have been selected to really become the chief gardener in the garden of God. And in the garden you must have pruning shears. And pruning shears is revision. You simply revise, and as you revise the day, you repeal the day. For the day is not slipping into the past. It does not recede as people think. It is always advancing into the future to confront you, either pruned or in some strange weed-like state. So it's entirely up to us. I hope that every man and woman here today will take me seriously and start this day pruning your garden, pruning your mind. I know before I leave this city in a matter of 2 weeks that you'll be able to tell me of the new things that spring in your world, or that spring from the prune tree that is your own lovely imagination. You try it, then you will know what Blake meant when he said, "In heaven, the only art of living is forgetting and forgiving. The only art of living is complete forgetfulness, by putting something in its place. No vacuum, but putting something in its place." So when you read these strange stories that you read in the daily press, you simply ignore them. They mean nothing. Men are calling themselves leaders, shepherds of the flock. They excommunicate, just not one religion, all religions. The leaders take it upon themselves to excommunicate, not knowing nothing is to be discarded. Not a thing in the world can you discard, for it is forever, but it can be pruned and made to conform with the ideal image. The man who will not revise his day either does not know it, or he has lost the vision of that life into the likeness of which it is the true labor of the Spirit of Jesus that transformed this life, so you don't discard them. In the current issue of Time magazine, there is that noble soul who is known to us as Spinoza, Baruch de Spinoza, who has given so much to the world of philosophy, so much everyone has been enriched because he walked the earth. And here, 300 years later, the ex-premier of Israel, Ben-Gurion, has asked the leading rabbis today to rescind that excommunication of 300 years ago. And they tell this noble soul today that they cannot rescind the works of their forefathers, that the curse remains forever. And you should read that silly, silly curse as it's printed in the current issue of Time magazine. They call upon all the angels to curse him, as though angels would curse. They call upon everything to blast him. You could not walk within 4 cubits of the man's shadow. No one should talk to him. No one should show him kindness. No one should write him and never read anything he ever has to say. And that's 300 years ago. The rabbis who so cursed him have long been forgotten, and if they do live, they only live by reason of their curse. And no one knows really who they really are, but you can't forget, if you read in this world, the works of Spinoza. Everyone in this audience possibly has used one of his phrases. Do you know it was he who said nature abhors a vacuum? Now you use it, I use it, but what is the source of it? It was Spinoza. For here was this giant of a mind that after 300 years, little minds who think they're leading the flock, they call themselves shepherds. They should go back and read well the book of Jeremiah. You have shepherds who spoil my vines, and you have come into my garden, and you have taken my vines. Now it bears no grape, and it bears no leaf, and the garden of Jerusalem now has become a weed. Read it in Jeremiah how he cries out because shepherds, who call themselves shepherds, are blind leaders of the blind. You take me this morning at my word. You owe me nothing. It costs you not a thing to come here this morning. You come, you give me your time, and I give you my time. But you go out and try it and start this day, pruning that wonderful imagination of yours. Do you know someone that is evil? Stop knowing it by bringing him before your mind's eye, and carry on with him the most wonderful conversation in the world, with a tender spirit, a loving spirit, and believe in the reality of this communion. Because if you really do it, you are entering the kingdom of heaven. For you enter heaven by a loving, knowing communion with a friend. So make him a friend. If he is a lovely one, no matter what he is, you can prune him, and then as you prune him, you are doing the work which you were sent to do for man. And you are that man. You are placed this day in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Don't let it continue growing weeds in your world. So this is something that people who either don't read Neville or who have read Neville and forgot conveniently don't really talk about. They leave this out. And I don't really like to talk about other people because I'm really just shitting on myself, but as far as I know, I mean, I don't know everybody, but the few YouTubers and people who've got Facebook groups and stuff that, I mean, I don't watch most of that anymore, but When I was looking at that stuff quite often, and I do know that now still there are people who disclaim responsibility. I'm responsible for them too. I'm responsible for that disclaiming. So when someone says, "Oh well, if there are people doing fucked up things in your world, well, that's not none of I'm not doing that, and it's not my job to fix them or whatever." No, that's you. That's you. That's what you've done, and same with them. Their denial is my doing, right? Um, Now, when Neville talks about when he talked about the shepherds just now, I think he was saying, and that is one circumstance where there are going to be people in those states who are more removed from your immediate reality. And that is just a state that you can really ignore. You don't have to necessarily revise that unless it's affecting you directly. And I think practically that would mean, you encounter something in a newspaper article and you don't know any of these people. And yeah, what's going on really sucks. But the thing to do there, instead of specifically revising it, unless you feel some need to, would just be to utterly ignore it. Because that's probably more akin to like a plant that died that you just need to rip out the ground and throw away, as opposed to like an actual rose that you're pruning, and keeping in a nice state. So we should just be conscious of how much priority does something actually have in our life. If it is someone you're interacting with, especially an intimate, like for people who that are looking to manifest a deep love relationship or a reunion with a family member, or a change in how their attitudes of their coworkers, someone you're dealing with on a daily or near daily basis. Maybe you didn't specifically imagine for whatever incident or thing they said, but it is still emanating from your state. It may be something that's dying out. You should always assume that it was a fragment of an old state. However, you are responsible for changing that in mind. Either if you can ignore it, or by revising it. And I would suggest, especially if it's an intimate, if they say something that really emotionally upset you, you need to revise it. And to just say, "Oh, well, they're just that way. I didn't do that." Well, you did. And you need to stop abdicating your responsibility. You are going to continue encountering those shitty situations until you truly take responsibility for them. And when it comes to people in your world who are your intimates, who don't have what they want, and I'm guilty of this sin, you need to start imagining lovely in a loving way for them. So if you know someone who there's things in their life that they don't have that they want, you need to start imagining they have them. Okay? And if there's any sort of envy or jealousy going on within you, you need to get rid of that too. However you want to let go of that. Probably by assuming you've already got the thing and now they've got the thing too. Like, you need to do that. If you're not doing that, if you're saying, well, that's their job, that's their business, if you're failing, you are actually failing at this. And that's not something you can just ignore and wipe away as, well, I'm doing my best. No, you're not doing your best. Like, let's be real, you're not doing your best. And I'm going to be real, I'm not doing my best on that. I'm absolutely not. I'm, as Neville said in a prior lecture, it's easier to teach it than to apply it. And it is pretty true. But look, come on. Like, if you had an argument with somebody, that's you. That's your fault, And maybe you didn't imagine the specific argument, but it's now your responsibility to do something about it in mind. Something. You are absolutely responsible for every being you meet in this world. That's your responsibility. Let me say it 10 more times for especially all the people who are going to watch this video at some point who also make videos about Neville. You are absolutely responsible for every being you meet in this world. That's your responsibility. Just like the teacher we told you of who took this little child that was just about to be expelled. Oh, I couldn't find that story, but he's going to tell a version of it here. This was another revision story I wanted to share. Just like that teacher we told you of who took this little child that was just about to be expelled. No, the child is not expelled because she heard what you were hearing this morning. So she brought before her mind's eye the child that the principal, the psychiatrist, and all the faculty had agreed unanimously to expel her on her 16th birthday, for she was rude, she was crude, she was unethical. And she went home on a Sunday night and brought that child before her mind's eye and communed with her, and saw in her a tender child, a considerate child, a loving child. The next day, Monday, in class, the child, she expressed all the kindness of the revision of the night before. And 10 days later, when it was seen and witnessed by all the faculty and the psychiatrist, another meeting was called, and they repealed their verdict of 10 days before, and the child is not expelled. She sits in the George Washington High School in New York City, which is considered an excellent school, and so there she is, with no black marks against her, because one teacher sat in the audience, as you are here, and she believed what I hope everyone here will believe, and she redeemed a branch of her own tree. She didn't realize the child was herself. She saw up to that very moment all the children that she taught in pure objectivity. Blind man sees the world objective to himself, something detached from himself. When man begins to awake, he sees everything subjectively related. Everything he meets is part of himself, and what he does not now understand, still he knows that it is related by affinity to some as yet unrealized force in his own being. So he doesn't discard it. He knows his life is the process by which he will redeem it, and he redeems it by using the pruning shears of revision. So I feel that if after these 50 years of walking this earth, that this is what the lady saw when I was but 7, I could really close the eye, talking about the vision he mentioned at the beginning, I could really close the eye on 3 dimensions at any moment, knowing you will not disprove it. You may never use them, but you will never disprove this art of revision. And any man who will try it will prove it to his own satisfaction, that he can rise beyond the wildest dreams of men. And rising, he awakens the spirit of forgiveness. He will rise in the early stages in the successful venture. He will increase his income. He will do all these things. But he will realize after a little while that wasn't the purpose. They were only toys to tickle him, toys to amuse him, until he awoke within himself the Spirit of Jesus. Then he sees an entirely different mission, not the amassing of wealth, but the redeeming of society, the redeeming of every man in the world. He comes to do his Father's will, and we are told in the 6th chapter of John that this is my Father's will, that all of that he has given me I should lose nothing, but I should raise it up again. Lose nothing, no, you don't excommunicate, you don't rub out, you simply raise it up again, and as you raise it up, you raise yourself up, and this journey is forever. Given that sentence there, I want to revise something I talked about, which is when it comes to forgetting. Noah's saying there still has to be something in its place. So you can assume that whatever traumatic experience is no longer influencing your reality. But you have to put something in its place. And if it was an incident involving another person, you have to, in mind, redeem them in some way. There has to be some joy for the ashes there. There's got to be. Okay. You're moving up an infinite vertical line in your own wonderful imagination. And you can only move up by lifting others up. Blind men think they can save themselves. And because they think they can save themselves and discard the rest. The blind man also said this hundreds of years ago. He saved as he saved others. Himself he cannot save. I say to you, that's a false statement. It was put in the mouth of the Pharisee, put it in the mouth of the Sanhedrin, the leaders who thought they were leaders. But I will tell you, a man saves himself by, and only by, the saving of his fellow man. There is no other way of saving self, other than by saving the real self, and every man is rooted in you who observes men. And so don't discard. Raise them up, prune the tree, and become the real gardener in the garden of God. Take anything. You have a child today. We took all the requests this morning. There were dozens and dozens of requests this morning. Every one must be answered. None must be discarded. Don't say one is impossible. There is nothing impossible to your imagination. Your imagination is Christ Jesus. With him all things are possible. Use him, stir him, wake him from his sleep. He has been sleeping through the centuries. Because he has slept, he has dreamed into being all these strange, misshaped states. For the world only bears witness of the use or misuse of imagination. As we are told, he is the only thing in the world. What he is the only thing in the world. Your imagination. For it is the habitation of every created thing, and by it all things are made, and without it is nothing made that is made. So use it wisely, use it lovingly, and any time you use your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are at that moment literally mediating God to man. Imagination is the redemptive power of the world, and you are actually mediating God to man by using it in a loving, wonderful way. Now let us go into the silence. And I'm pretty sure he didn't include the questions, yeah. So if anyone who's listening has any thoughts about this, please let me know in chat right now. One thing, I was just we'll leave that up for a second, and then I'll scoot back to the little chat room animation. But one thing I was thinking today, and yesterday too, is two things. Number one, if you really want to fuck with someone, give them what they want, and then give them what they want without asking for absolutely anything in return. Give it to them totally freely. And I was thinking more about, why is that? Like, why? Because I just noticed there's this tendency in people to be suspicious of something given freely, especially something so wonderful. And, at the base, I had a dream that told me all about it. People want to prove themselves. They're not always interested in the goal. They're interested in what they think they're going to get through the goal, like, in a most abstract sense. But really, they're more interested in impressing seeming others, sometimes even when those seeming others are dead. We'll just look at, there are people who, they really rise in prominence in the world, and long after their parents have gone, they're still doing all this stuff to impress parents who are now deceased. Like, it's still being carried by their conception of what they need to do to please their parents, and they have an intense desire to please those parents, even though those parents are gone. Like, it's pretty wild. Also, people want to earn things, and I don't know how much of that is something I can forgive, and something that is just a consequence of what Neville calls the objective man, the blind man, the sleeping man. Like, when you're asleep and you have no idea how the world really works, and you don't know this is a dream, you think so much labor needs to be involved in obtaining and achieving anything you desire. And so to disprove that to someone who is not ready to wake up is almost like too much a shock, and they resent you for it. My friend, I don't know if she's listening, but she had told me about a lecture, and I haven't found it again yet, but she told me about a lecture where I think it was a woman trying to tell her husband about Neville's teachings. It might have even been specifically about revision, because she was imagining for something that they were both somehow involved in. And so she was trying to tell him what she was doing and how it would work. And as she was talking to him, she heard, though he didn't say it out loud, she heard in her mind his voice yelling at her, "I just want to sleep." Like, screaming at her, "Leave me alone, I just want to sleep." I'm sure at some point we'll find that. At some point we're going to do all the lectures, so we'll find it. But the idea there is that there are people who are so sound asleep that they don't want to know this. They don't want to be awakened this way. You should still imagine lovingly on their behalf, but don't expect that when you tell them how this works, that they're going to believe you, and it's possible they may not want to talk to you much anymore, just because they're so married and in love with sacrificing themselves in ways that are really masochistic in order to get things they think they want. They just love it. They just love it. And then when you give them something wonderful for free, they're just like, what the fuck is this? It's too much of a shock. It's way too much of a shock. What was the other thing I was thinking about? Well, there's a bunch of things. But the sense of success and the sense of failure. And contained within that, the main thing I was thinking about is, I don't remember how often Neville talks about fear. I know when I first found Neville, I had a series of vision dreams that told me about fear, because I had questions about fear. Because it seems to be that, well, maybe we'll come across it. Well, we will come across it eventually in some lectures. Maybe he has more in-depth discussions of fear. But for the most part, he seems to just say to just not let yourself think those fearful thoughts. Don't let yourself be deeply amused and entranced by thoughts of fear, to discard them on the spot and instead refocus your thoughts on already having whatever you desire, on the world already being in a lovely state, on the person you're imagining for already having the thing they want. Don't waste time on that fear. Don't start imagining from a fearful state all these horrible things that can occur. Just don't do it. Like, literally his advice is just don't do it. But I was thinking, like, Joseph Murphy talks more about the consequences of really sort of ambiguous and latent fear that you're not eliminating from your mind. And he also talks about guilt and how those things can create if you don't address them directly. Now, Neville would say you address them directly by putting something in its place. So if you were in a fearful state and manifested something unlovely, you now need to go in and revise that and put something nice in its place instead. So if you were so deeply afraid of, like, breaking a limb, and you were having mad fantasies about it all the time, at some point you identify with being a broken limb, and now you've broken your arm. You could go back and revise that you either weren't imagining for that you always kind of had a state of health. You could also imagine a quick recovery. And certainly if you did this towards another person, if someone told you they were always malingering, because we know there are these people in these states where they want to tell you about how much their life sucks, and especially they want to tell you about their health problems, start imagining them telling you about how well they feel. I mean, in general, this is something you should be doing, but the point there is you allowed your mind to affiliate with their fear, to get subdued and seduced by it. Don't do that. Obviously, don't do that. Go give yourself some joy for ashes in that case. Like, go redeem them in mind and feel the joy that you have a friend who is so happy and content and healthy in their body. But I was also thinking in general, like, when it comes to certain things you want to manifest for your personal life, or even in some cases it may be for others, if you look at it and you have this, like, pain point, and it may manifest as an envy towards people who already have what you want. I talked about this when Campbell was on. We talked about it indirectly. So, like, say, for example, you do want a certain amount of wealth or a certain job, and you come across people either directly by meeting them or indirectly by encountering them in media or whatever, and you see, well, they have what I want, roughly, or even precisely. They have what you want. And you notice there's this, like, immediate antagonism towards them and aggressiveness towards them. That's because there's some pain point in yourself that you are holding on to, that you're in a masochistic way married to. And so what I'm talking about there is, like, let's say there's someone who wants to be some big marketing executive, and right now they're basically a freelancer writing ads for the agencies that they want to be in charge of. And, you know, they have a lot of resentment about themselves not having accomplished enough. and a lot of just kind of general, they're just not happy with what they've accomplished so far, and they beat up on themselves a little bit too much. And then they meet someone who is younger than them, maybe even dumber than them, hasn't even done as much in terms of working on actual campaigns, who is now the head of an agency they've been working for like 8 years. And they immediately like have so much resentment and aggression towards this person. Just like an aggressive envy. Well, if they really pick that apart, they might find that there are assumptions alive in them keeping them from realizing that state themselves. It could be as simple as, oh, well, I'm never going to get that far. It could just be simple as that, but on a loop for a long time. But they might also have something a little deeper going on where they realize that if they had that position, they might, just as a natural course of how they've observed how things go in the industry, have to work a lot more hours. And they might have to move to a city they don't want to move to. And they might lose a little bit of the work leisure life balance that they've attained by being a freelancer. So for that reason, they never really see themselves in that job, because part of how they would imagine themselves in that job would mean less time with their family, less time for their hobbies, less time for whatever side pursuits, less time for just general relaxation, and more time on the job. And so they never really envision themselves in that role. Now, of course, if they know about imagination, they know they can have that job and still maintain their work-life balance, should they choose. There may also be some deeper fear about, they know, and this would be pretty hard to get around, that if they have that job, they have to lead the meetings, they have to give a lot of presentations. And they have an intense fear of public speaking, because they have intense fear of embarrassing themselves or being judged by seeming others. This is a fear I've been confronting within myself and trying to move away from, just simply by doing these streams. And so that is what's actually creating the aggression they feel towards this person that has the job they want. Okay, that's what's actually creating that within them, is this fear that they're so in love with, because they hold on to it aggressively and they won't let it go. They won't even let it go so strongly that they never even see themselves having the success they want. If this is you and you have been doing that, you can use revision in a very powerful and impactful way. In the example of this person, they could simply revise something like let's say in this person's individual history, they also wanted to be they want to do some activity in high school that would have involved public speaking. Let's say they wanted to be in the debate team, but they avoided it because of their fear. They could revise that they were actually on a debate team and that they won, I don't know what they are in debate, that they won like local tournaments and stuff like that. And people actually, I'm laughing already because people knew them as a master debater when they were in high school. That was maybe even their joke nickname. They could revise that and see that revision alone allowed them to let go of this fear and this identity of being someone who is bad at public speaking, bad at presenting their ideas to other people. They could do that and that alone and let go of that. And then see that naturally they're going to move into imagination in the job, and in less than a year have that job. So revision has a lot of far-reaching applications. In this lecture, Neville primarily encouraged revising every day. Like I admitted, it's the kind of thing where I struggle to do it every day, just because it's a lot of stuff. I mean, to do it properly takes about an hour. And it's like, I do have that time, but it's an hour you have to really focus, like from what I experienced. Maybe you could do it faster and find a way to do it even faster, where you're only picking the things you want to change. Like before you even lay down in your bed, okay, well, there's 4 things I want to change. There's 4 conversations I had today that there's something about them I want to change. So I can just, boom, I'll just do those. That actually I need to apply myself. Like before I even go in the bed, before I even, just like as I'm winding down, just write a quick list of the things I want to revise and have those in mind as I go to bed. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for today on revision. Tomorrow, I'll be doing the stream at 7 p.m. I'm going to try to let some people know in advance because, being that it's Neville's birthday, I would like a little more people to be on the stream and enjoying it before we actually get into it. So I haven't totally decided, but I'm probably going to do Neville's Purpose Revealed as a lecture, which is a little bit more wild and intensive a lecture because it does include some of his visions that he experienced personally. However, I think that's pretty relevant to his birthday. Like, we'll examine, what he had revealed to him as the purpose of his life. Why he is alive in your consciousness is effectively the point of that lecture. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. If anybody's watching this on a replay, I'm quite proud right now because it should be technically better than the Mardi Gras one. And I think I've done revision. We've done this topic to a pretty competent degree. For anyone who encountered revision in a very reduced manner and they want to know what Neville actually said and all of the concepts involved around revision, at this point, I've done every lecture that would help you understand that. There are more lectures on it and concerning the topics of forgiveness and sin and states. However, if you look over my full streams from the past week and a half, 2 weeks, that's everything Neville ever did on this topic. And it gives you enough foundation to imagine really for anything. But if you would just look over those, listen to those, you would have the full actual foundation to talk about revision, not what you heard third hand in a YouTube video or saw fifth hand in basically a meme on a group or in an Instagram post. Like, this is the source material that I'm giving to you here by the person who believes that they were sent to give you this information. So if you still have questions, and I do, but if you still have questions, I would say anyone who has questions, you can email me imaginationstream@gmail.com, and if I know where it is in the lectures, I'll let you know. Like, and I really mean, like, I really want, like, if you have personal questions, I tend not to want to answer those. But if you have questions about, well, what did Neville say about this? What did Neville say about that? I probably know where it is in the lectures and books. And if I don't, I'll encounter it at some point and just, like, make a note to let you know when I find it. But yeah, imaginationstream@gmail if you want to let me know. Also, if anybody listens to this who has an interesting revision success story, I would like to hear those. And I don't have to, I really just want to read it. Like, I mean, if you say, please could you share this, I will share it on a future stream. But for the most part, I just want to hear people's very interesting revision experiences. Because the more and more of those I encounter, the more I'm interested in actually pushing revision for myself. And that's why I put on today our two assumptions for the day. I am great at revision, and revision brings miracles into my life. Because, this is a thing where you should approach it with an expectation of things that you prior thought impossible now becoming possible. Like, you should feel imaginatively towards this aspect of imagination. To feel otherwise possibly limits your good and the good of other people in your reality that you would revise for. All right, so that's it for today. See y'all tomorrow, probably 7 p.m. Central. If it's going to be later, I might come on just briefly to say, it's going to be another half hour or whatever. But by 7 p.m., I should be wrapped up all the other stuff I got to do tomorrow. All right, I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
I was talking about ending, but the having an experience, it wasn't subjective. It was objective. Only when I looked and reflected upon the experience did I refer to it as a subjective experience. This is now objective. And all from now on, we in this room and the meeting to you will be a subjective experience, a memory image. So I say everything is truly within, and we can test it. You take a dream, a daydream, of something you want for yourself, or something you want for another. And you represent to yourself a scene which is truly implies the fulfillment of that dream. And like you rest that dream, and so you construct a scene. Any kind of a scene implies the fulfillment of your desire. And then to the degree that you are self-persuaded of the reality of that imaginal act, it will become fact in your world. I can tell you a number of stories to support that claim. It's not theory anymore. This is fact, based upon experience. So when we're told in the book of Luke, the kingdom of God is within you. You can take it and have it. These garments that you and I are wearing are parts of the eternal structure of the universe. You are wearing the garment as an act of wearing a costume. You are not the garment you wear. You are doing this for a purpose, a heavenly purpose, which will not these garments. You are that being that my friend discovered who sees it from above. And to see this universe from above is so completely unlike what it appears to me seen from this angle. It's not this at all. But you come down into this world of death for a purpose, to break their observation. And he claims he did not write it from his conscious reasoning mind, that the word of dictated of the spirit of love. And God is love. Therefore, if the spirit of love dictated the words of Jerusalem, then is God dictated. And in this he said, those in great eternity who contemplate on love, or rather contemplate on death, say this: what seems to be is, to those to whom it seems to be, even a promise, despair of eternal death. But divine mercy steps beyond and redeems man in the body of Jesus. Now that's something that many can grasp and understand. But I tell you it is true. To stand in the presence of the risen Christ and commune face to face and voice to voice, and to have love, infinite love, embrace you. And as he embraces you, you fuse with him without loss of identity, no change in your identity, and yet you're one with the body of Christ. One day he sends you. He can't send you out himself because you're one with him. There's nothing possible. No separation without from the top. So when he makes this statement, divine mercy steps beyond and redeems man in the body of Christ. So in my last little pamphlet, I made this statement I made an experience. If you and I are resurrected one by one to unite into a single